Hello and welcome to the Pneumatics video. So in this video I'm going to show you all you need to know about pneumatics. So to start off, what are pneumatics? So pneumatics are basically anything operated by air pressure. In our robot here, you can see this arm here was operated with these two large pistons, which are air operated. Here you can see tubing coming from that. So they can be used to actuate certain parts on the robot that cannot be actuated by motors, such as possibly lifting an arm or propelling something out and bringing it back in with a large amount of force. So, air pressure and capacity. So, when you are planning out a pneumatics loop, there are going to be a couple things you have to consider. So, one is air pressure. In the competition, depending on what year you are competing in, they will disclose a maximum PSI, which stands for pounds per square inch, which is basically just a measurement of the air pressure in your loop. They will specify a maximum amount of PSI that you can have in your loop, which you can set with a regulator valve. And here in the top right, you can see a gauge saying what PSI the loop is at. Another thing to consider with air pressure is the more air pressure you have going through a piston, which is the actuator in the loop, the stronger the piston is. So the more pressure, the more power. But there are limits to how much you can put through each piston. So another part to consider is capacity. So the capacity of your loop is how much air is in it. So this will impact how many actuations of a piston you can do before having to compress your air again using your compressor. And the main thing we used for capacity are air tanks, like this or this. Now, the rest of your loop also holds capacity, so all the tubes will have air built up in them, as well as the pistons. So next, we're going to talk about solenoids. So solenoids are what allow you to control the flow of air in your loop. So here, it splits one off into two. So this one at the bottom is going to be your input air, so air from your loop, and then the output is going to be one for one side of your piston and the other for the other. So here on the sides we also have these two blue buttons. That's for manual activation, so you can press them with a screwdriver and it will just automatically swap it to the other side. And on either side, the wires coming out are for plugging into the pneumatics control module, which allow code to do it automatically. So, pistons. Pistons are the actuators in a pneumatic loop. So, pistons work by either pressurizing one end or the other of the piston. So here, in this little animation, you can see there is a rod going down and then a little cylinder that is perfectly sealed on either end, and by pressurizing one side or the other and allowing the other side to depressurize, you move the cylinder forward or back. So by pressurizing the front of it and allowing air to pass out of the back, you effectively force the piston back and vice versa. So this is the same concept, just in a smaller form factor. So there are a couple things to consider. The smaller your piston, typically the more force it can push something with. So this works as there's less room to pressurize, so you can more quickly pressurize that area. Whereas a longer rod will allow you to move something farther, but with less force. So, for connecting all of your pneumatic components together, there are two principal ways of doing that. So the first here, pictured in this, is by screwing certain parts together. So here we have a release, which is always required as it allows you to depressurize your loop. A gauge here which shows what the total loop pressure is at the release here, just to make sure it's the same all around the loop. And this is your pressure switch, which tells the compressor when to turn off. So here you can see they are threaded connections. So when you are using a threaded connection, what you want to do is place a little bit of this here, which is called Teflon tape, on the thread, and then screw in the thread to your other end with the Teflon tape on it. And this Teflon tape allows the loop to be completely sealed. Another way that you're going to connect up your loop is with tubing. So this red tube and black tube here are both examples of that. So in this picture you can see there's a little green circle at the end here. So the most important part when connecting with tubing is ensuring that the tube is as flat as possible, because if it's angled, it is not going to make a good connection in here. So once you have cut your tube to the desired length and it is as flat as possible, all you have to do to connect it is just push it in. Now to disconnect, what you want to do is pull up on that green circle, and then while you are pulling up, pull out the tube. So the basic troubleshooting step for making sure your loop is completely sealed is filling a bucket full of soapy water, and then using a brush of some sort to apply that soapy water to all of your connections. So here where all the Teflon tape is, you'd want to put a little bit of soapy water there, and if you see it start acting strange, as in it's blowing around, once the loop is pressurized, you can tell that there is a leak there, and what you want to do is keep note of where all the leaks are, then depressurize your loop and redo the connections. So the basic structure for your loop is pictured in the top right here. So you have your compressor that compresses directly to your storage tank, which then splits off to your release and pressure switch, and to a valve with a regulator on top of that. So the regulator is basically just a little knob that you can turn to change the pressure on the loop. So to operate that, you just pull out the top of it, turn it to whichever PSI you want, and then push it down to lock it in place. And then the other side of that pressure gauge goes to your solenoids and then to your components, your actuator, pistons, and such. So thank you for checking out the pneumatics portion of this tutorial, and I hope you have enjoyed, and I wish you luck in your future season.